here we go. So, didn't realize when I started my stream that my audio was not working. So, gonna do my best to narrate it and explain what was going on at least, since I wasn't able to do that. I was really working on first a moon satellite. We had a contract to get a satellite around the moon in high orbit. And it was fairly polar orbit, pretty close to a polar orbit, high inclination. And I decided it would be a good idea to kill two birds with one stone and get a survey scanner here up on to the satellite as well. So I picked a good core. Threw the survey scanner on first because it's pretty large. And then started working from there. Now the contract did also ask for a goo canister and a temperature scanner. So I had to put those on there as well. I played around with this a little bit before I finally decided on what I was going to go with, but this is pretty much the design. Added a few things here. Ended up bringing the fuel a little further down on the structure. Decided to give it its own fuel and separate off from this lower stage as a it's supposed to be a trans-lunar stage. Because of a mistake I made on here, I ended up not being able to use it that way. Obviously needed some sort of power source. I was looking to see if there's any kind of detail as to how much power it really used. I guess it doesn't actually use very much. Since I was sending this to the moon, I decided a relay network antenna might also be a good idea. Since all my moon satellites are fairly out of date for a relay network and had some trouble with communications earlier. Thought it couldn't hurt. Again, since we're already sending it, might as well. It did make this a pretty expensive satellite, though. Obviously need some power storage. Messing with the screen. I can clearly see where that was. Spark engine, just to power the satellite itself. Regular antennas as well, just to make myself feel better. I'm actually not sure they were needed. But they looked cool, and they're cheap. actually are needed, because I think the relay antenna can't do direct communication. Started getting everything better lined up. Move in the relay antenna a little bit, just so it would fit in the fairing. Obviously needed a separator there, stack separator, before I went on to the larger stage. I tried out some different looks here. I tried out a larger reaction wheel system, but A, it didn't look good, and B, it just wasn't necessary. And this adapter, I ended up getting rid of that adapter. Yep, there it goes. And I decided to strut the structure down to the base, just to make sure it stayed steady, because that's kind of a top-heavy structure. I thought that was probably a good idea. Finally, a Terrier engine. Forget, that was supposed to be the transmooner injection stage. Didn't end up working out that way. What we made do. So at this point I started grabbing the fairing. I'd forgotten at this point to put the Separatrons on the lower part of the bus to separate that transmooner stage. I did end up remembering to put those on though. What I forgot to do was put them on the fairing stage down there at the bottom. Let's see, I'm going and grabbing those now. I thought I was. Did not. I was just checking for anything else I might have forgotten, and that's when I realized, there we go, now I realized it. I needed those Separatrons, so we could eject the transmooner stage into the moon and not leave any space debris. Which is good on paper, but then I forgot to do the same thing for the stage down there at the bottom. So, ended up not really helping myself out at all. Needing to take the rocket second stage all the way to the moon. This ended up being a lighter payload than I should have needed a K7 for as well. The K7 is my more cost-effective option. Even the K5, that would have been the logical choice, was actually more expensive. So this ended up being my choice. After fiddling around a bit, what I ended up deciding on, I was kind of wishy-washy on it. I ended up taking the solid rocket boosters off. Trying my hand at a boosted Titan II, as in giving it a third stage, as opposed to a what would have been a pretty accurate fill-in for a Titan 3D, or 3C rather, 3C. Fix the staging to go along with it. And while this did end up working, I definitely regret I didn't put the Supertrons on that second stage. That would have made things a lot easier. We would have gotten a lot more done with the fuel we had. But like I said, we ended up making it all the way to a moon orbit. In fact, we made it all the way without using the final satellite fuel. So it has some fuel left over to later deorbit itself, if the need arises. Pretty slim profile, though. Yep, a little bit of wobbling. On its way. Now the downside of increasing the throttle on the Bobcat engine and removing the boosters, this now had a shorter burn time, and that would be lower in the atmosphere than we needed to fire the second stage, which is very inefficient in atmosphere. However, I was right. It was enough to get to orbit. That was not a problem. So design-wise, pretty well lined up, aside from forgetting the aforementioned sectortrons. Gravity turn was a little wobbly. So we did have a very top-heavy craft there. We saw a roll as part of that. Another downside of the Bobcat engine, as opposed to the engine configuration I use for the K12, 15, and 18, the new version of the 15 at least. Using the single Reliant engine and a pair of thuds gives us a lot of roll control. Slightly more thrust through this segment here, as it would still be burning at this point. But no, on this rocket we're already on to second stage. And we're more or less to an altitude where it's going to start performing efficiently once again. As we work on our horizontal velocity. Started the chase prograde. Drop the fairing. Now that we're at a safe altitude. assist so we can do this a little easier. So we're not fighting the prograde marker and just fighting the computer control. Actually pitched down slightly, so we were doing a little bit of a radial burn as we were going and aiming just a little off of prograde. This way we'd be increasing our horizontal velocity and actually steering our apogee much or driving our apogee. Yeah, words. I'm not even going to edit this. I'm going to keep that. What I'm trying to say is driving our perigee, there we are, faster than we're driving our apogee by a lot, by angling down like that. That way we're not throwing unnecessary effort into raising our apogee. And in fact, I ended up cutting the engines here, as our apogee still got quite high. Still got up to 103 kilometers. So I planned out a circularization maneuver. Had us lined up for that. And somewhere around here I realized my mistake of not having the Separatrons. Now, if I had remembered them, that actually would have been a slight waste of fuel, though. We did have some fuel left in this second stage. We would have had the deorbit. Ah, yep. There I am. Realizing I didn't put the Separatrons on. Now, Past Steve is finally caught up. It's okay, Past Steve. I forgive you. So after I did the circularization burn, I started trying to figure how I was going to pull this off. I ended up transferring fuel down from the lunar injection stage down to the second stage there. So I had very little fuel left. Actually, that would have been almost perfect if I had just had the Separatrons on. Actually a shame that I didn't. It would have been very cool to see that line up that well. Now the other side of that, because I obviously don't want to leave debris in space, is I started working on getting the maneuver far enough. Oh, now I ended up needing to time warp this so I could get it where I wanted it. I wanted it so I would be coming out in front of the moon. So the moon would be catching and pulling the whole assembly backwards in its orbit, so retrograde. And the reason for that, the reason you'd want it in this case to get pulled retrograde towards the moon, is so as we got to that point, we'd be slowing down the booster, the second stage. So its orbital velocity would slow as part of that, and that would cause it to have a much lower perigee when it came back down to Kerbin. You're essentially doing a gravity brake. Instead of a gravity assist, you're doing a gravity brake. You can see here it brings it pretty low. It's almost to an impact. So that's the maneuver I ended up going with. Now, as I said, I had to transfer some fuel down. Got myself ready to time warp into to that maneuver once again. It is really a shame I didn't get to use the trans-mooner stage as intended. But off we went. Not a perfect burn. I had to do some correction here. And then even after this correction, I needed to do a little more prograde. Maybe I'm thinking of a different launch. This ended up actually going pretty well. So as you can see, once it has its moon encounter, it comes back and heads pretty much right into impact. Actually, I think that is an impact with Kerbin. So that got rid of all our debris. Ended up keeping it on the craft until we got a little closer. That way the ejection force wouldn't change the orbit too much. Wanted to make sure it had that encounter. So I ended up transferring all the fuel that I could back up to the transmooner stage. Which ended up not being a lot of fuel. It does mean that that stage would have been overkill. Now from this point I realized, didn't realize I had planned out, I guess, more launches for Minmus were going to be necessary. So I started putting some focus on Minmus here. We still had a relay network that was out and around Minmus that we needed to get deployed. Still in a 3 relay stack. Not doing us much of any good. Let's see, I don't remember if I went to that immediately or what I did. So we still have the Mun station core, which is going to become our Minmus station. Started getting that ready. This was our relay craft. We needed to get it to a lower orbit in order to have a Minmus synchronous period. There we are. There's our 3 relay stack. And we did also have our nuclear transfer vehicle on the way. Here, I believe I noted, with how slow we're going, how easy it was going to be to overshoot our maneuver. And I tried looking for what the orbital period was of Minmus, like what the day cycle would be, I guess. And it ended up being some really weird amount. I think it was like 1 day, 5 hours and 13 minutes or something along those lines. I ended up relying on the wiki for that, because I had expected that kind of information would be, set up for Minmus. Although I guess if I had clicked on Minmus, it might have actually helped instead of staying clicked on the vessel. I didn't realize I did that till now. So maybe it does show you. I'll have to check on that. Wish I'd realized that before. It's okay, we forgive Past Steve, because Past Steve had wine. And Past Steve is allowed to do silly things while he's drinking his wine. Yep, there we go, looking it up. Now I had it. So there we go. Now I started getting the altitude right. So the altitude, I didn't check the orbital period yet at this point, but the altitude, 357,940 meters. So I tried to get that as exact as possible. So I set up the maneuver. I ended up then working on some other launches once I had the maneuver set up, since this was quite a while away. So that is another extended K7 launcher. This one we did use the boosters, just extended the extra fuel on there. It worked out pretty good. I didn't have much extra fuel by the time we were done with this this second stage. Now I did need to set up our Minmus station. Another long wait for that maneuver. Try to get that into a circular orbit. And then we still had a satellite out, far out from Minmus. This probe, actually, rather than relay, was for completing contracts. We still had one more contract that we could complete, and had a lot of inclination difference to plan out for this one. It's almost a 90-degree difference in inclination, so that was pretty rough. Basically, the maneuver involved a lot of braking and a lot of normal burn. So what that ends up doing, if you really look at it, is you're basically bringing the craft to a dead stop, and then burning enough normal that you're creating a new orbit from scratch. You're basically bringing yourself to a dead standstill and then going off the direction you want to go. Which, if you were to do this maneuver close into Kerbin, would be very fuel expensive. You would be using a lot of fuel to try and accomplish this. But around Minmus, not a lot of speed to cancel out, not a lot of speed to gain. Get yourself back into orbit. You're talking the magnitude of maybe 40 meters a second. So, really not too bad. And then combining the maneuvers into one makes it even easier. So you can see we're only really using 40.5 meters a second of delta V. But another maneuver that I would have to wait for. So I started working on the next launchers to Minmus. So first up, another one of those survey satellites. This time I needed the extra power. So I ended up putting a full K7 on there. And thrust limiting a little bit more, so we had a little longer burn on the first stage, since it is still a little bit of a light payload. That way we didn't accelerate too much immediately. If you accelerate too much on the ground, off the pad initially, what you're going to do is you're going to create additional aerodynamic forces. It's actually going to cause you to absorb more fuel usage just getting off the ground. So wanted to try and limit that down, give us more fuel efficiency and also more stability, that extra aerodynamic force on a top heavy craft. not have been a good idea. Some fins could have alleviated that as well, but again, just be creating more aerodynamic drag and getting less delta V, so something to be avoided. A little bit of staging correction here. I did put the Separatrons on now at this point. You see I had those underneath the fairing there. Now the idea would be that we get to orbit with more fuel on the second stage, and the second stage would be free to do our inclination burn before we used our trans-Minmus stage. However, we ended up not using all that much fuel for that transfer. I ended up putting fuel in the second stage once again. We'll see that in a moment. Oh, I forgot about this. So things were a little wobbly when we launched. There's some weird autostrad issues, I think. And you can see one of the towers actually let go and re-grabbed, so we're at a weird angle. So my solution was scary to say the least. It's just to drop both the towers. And let us take off directly from the pad. It did seem to work just fine, so we're gonna just call that luck. I did have to do a little bit of steering initially as we took off. First a rotation correction, and that gave us a little bit of a pitch that we needed to correct while we headed off the pad. Very minor maneuvers, nothing major going on there. It never gets old for me, having the boosters just destroy themselves. It's a very good way to handle that. It's a very good way to get rid of those. Keep them from falling down to Kerbal Space Center. So now riding out the extended burn for the first stage. Decided to start chasing prograde as we got pretty high apogee, but really already we were ready to start going horizontal right as the engine cut out. So our second stage got to do what it does best, just operate in next to zero or zero atmosphere. So I did put this at a very strong pitch downwards. Again, same with the last time we launched this. Trying to drive the perigee very aggressively without raising our apogee too much. So you're actually lowering our apogee by doing that. So I did start to level out a little bit. I didn't want to necessarily lower our apogee. I just didn't want to work too hard to drive it. So when I go start chasing prograde, so we started to get pretty close. Things leveled out pretty quick again though. Oh, that would have been nice to know sooner. And I'll let Pat Steve take it from here. are now getting our Minmus survey satellite in place. Our moon survey satellite already on the way. Do one circularization burn here. Over to stability assist mode. Get that maneuver set up. Okay. Actually get this into its orbit. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring the chat back up, since I'm missing that right now. There we are. Alright. Now we need to try and do the inclination burn for Minmus. Oh, not moon. Minmus. So I can actually try and do this properly. Even if this does waste a lot of fuel doing that here. We're going to have a 13-second burn. So we can go ahead and time warp to that. We're going to want to be about 7 seconds away from the maneuver node. Are. A little bit of correction still. Alright, perfect. We're in the correct inclination. Now, a burn coming up actually that we could do. Take us up on that one. 50-second burn. We're gonna have to stage partway through that, which is gonna be kind of inconvenient. Let's unfortunately do the same thing we did with the last satellite. Transfer fuel. So 22 seconds away from maneuver. We're gonna start here. Just a second. our Minmus transfer burn. Minmus injection. Just a little more prograde. A little less prograde? Wow, that's surprising. Might have overshot. That's what it was, we overshot. Huh. Alright. Transfer fuel back up to the actual satellite bus here. As we are going to ditch this stage as soon as we're much closer to Minmus. Let us deorbit this space debris. Once again, have another survey scanner on the way without the worry of space debris. So now, I need to test one more thing for Minmus. We need a rover. We need something on the ground telling us where our best mining positions are going to be, because we will be doing mining very shortly. So I'm no longer worried about the survey scanner. Let's see. Actually be something I would want to do in vehicle assembly, not the vehicle assembly building, the aircraft hangar, spaceplane hangar. Words. A heavy core. The vehicle. I don't want something that small. Put some trussing. Nope, that's too big. Ooh, that doesn't work either. So what wheels do we have unlocked? Nothing too fancy if I remember right. Yep. Very not fancy. That almost looks like it can handle, really, without these even. let's do this. Just as a place to put some engines. Yep, so that's not going to be balanced. Lower that just a little bit. And then we want to move it in. There, that's balanced. Almost, actually. Oh, no, that's pretty balanced. Okay. Very basic rover. Put a scanner on it. And we need solar panels. This actually has 1,208 meters a second of delta V. It's actually impressive. All right, now we need kind of antenna. There we go, antenna. Probe control, radio contact, surface scanner, repulsively land. This looks pretty good. It's a really simple Minmus lander. And I'm sure it is very light. 1 ton. The question is, how do I get it there? It's going to be the hard part. This is a subassembly. Oh, I can't make that the route, huh? Well, that sucks. Alright, well let's make that the route then. Okay, let's take the whole thing, make it a subassembly. Selected part is not attachable. I need something that can be radially attached, which I thought these tanks could. I was actually pretty confident about that one. Selected part is not attachable. Find that hard to believe. Yeah, see, it is attachable. It's lying to me. Huh. Did the engines a different way. And throw this on stacked vertically, like this. How's the center of mass look? Way off? Okay, yeah, way off. We would need something like this. Okay, that actually looks good. So we need that. That. Okay. And then we need a new engine to put on this. Doesn't interfere with everything. So the spider would be our savior today. Yep. Pair of those. Our thrust is a little off, so we need to move the center of mass forward. Apparently it's not heavy enough to make any significant difference. So I need to move the center of mass forward. Can I just put an extra battery on the front? Extra one of these in the front. Something to be dead weight. I don't have Stewie here, so finding dead weight's not that easy. Let's... just put that on and do... that, so it's at least even. Yeah, that should do the trick. Okay, then we got an adapter. So this monstrosity can actually do what I want it to do. This is way. Quite a bit, actually. Wow, and this is a large adapter, isn't it? This is gonna be interesting. This is gonna be interesting. See, I need this offset. I just don't need an offset that's this large. This is just gonna be comical. I might be okay with comical today. I might just be happy with comical. So let's just do the crazy option here. That looks pretty well lined up to me. All right. We're gonna need a payload fairing. It's just so silly looking. Why am I doing these things? Just make it look sillier, because I can. Alright, now we need something to launch this thing. Which is up around 8 tons. It's actually going to be more, because I think I need to put that separate from that. Or I think I will end up not getting fuel to the engine. It is now 8.5 tons. Alright. This is reassuring. Oh, what have I done? All this for the tiny 1-ton lander. There's got to be a better way to do this. Let's put one of these on. Okay, now we need to move this. There we go, much more effective. That should do. fuel tanks. Reverse control point. Okay. There's an absurd amount of delta V. Absurd is what we like here. Now, total payload now 3 tons. So now it's time where we need to go with something tiny. Lunar transfer. Should probably do the job just fine. Oh, shit. Not the root part. Forgot. Okay, now I got the root part. Wonder what was going on there. Alright, now to fix the staging, which is probably a giant mess. So, we want those and those to fire. We want the main engine down here to fire. We want these to go. So all that's going to go. Then we want the second stage to separate. Okay. Before that, the boosters have to separate. Make one for the fairing, since that usually goes pretty early on. Okay. Ditch that stage and deorbit it. Fire the next stage off, and we can fire that, and then we can do that. Okay, great. We have a probably way overpowered Minmus lander. Rover thing. And hopefully this thing actually works. I didn't even bother to check to see if it actually works, but, you know, whatever. Details. Small details. Making sure our payload actually works before we send it off to Minmus, not important. Haven't used one of these in a long time. Go. A little bit of a roll made that difficult, but not too bad. actually start leveling out already. Okay, we're going to ride all this extra weight through the atmosphere. I'm going to keep that weight with us because we're not thrusting at the moment. And we want to maintain our momentum. Okay, now that we're pretty much out of the atmosphere, that mess with us first. Recorrect to prograde and fire. Alright, going for orbit. Aim just a little bit down as well. Getting our little dirt mobile up to Minmus. Still need to do some circularization, but not too bad. Set Minmus as our target. See what happens to our... What the heck? That's not what I wanted to do. Add maneuver. No. Darn it. Okay. Get our inclination corrected. That'll raise our periaps to a safe altitude anyway. So I might as well just do that one maneuver and be happy with it. An 11-second burn. So let's go ahead, let's warp this maneuver. A little closer. A little bit of correction. Ah, thank you. Let's see. Now we correct that. Overshot that a little bit. But we're still pretty much on the right inclination, so we're good. Now. Here. Our next pass. Let's see. There we go. That's exactly where we need that to be. Not quite achievable with just the stage, so we're going to dump some fuel into it. This is becoming a pattern for Minmus trips, I guess. Probably because I tuned everything to work for travel to Mun. Just a little different. But there we are. That should do the trick. Now we can prepare for the maneuver. Okay. So 35-second maneuver, we're going to have to wait till about 17 seconds, 18 seconds away from the start of our maneuver to begin burning. All right. We did just kind of, for some reason, glide out of alignment, so we need to correct that real quick. There we go. Now we're good. Still a little bit of correction. It'll be much easier when we can finally unlock targeting those maneuver nodes automatically. And let's see, target position, we're a little off. So we're going to have to just maybe do a little more prograde, I think. Yep, there we go. There's the rendezvous maneuver we wanted. And I think that conveniently just used the last drop of fuel. It did indeed. So, actually was the perfect amount of fuel to transfer in. I don't have to worry about transferring it back. We can ride this all the way to the Minmus encounter, more or less. So nuclear transfer vehicle. Still a while out. Next closest thing is going to be our moon scanner. But let's head over to Minmus and just see what maneuvers are coming up here for stuff that's already in orbit. Pretty sure one of these has a maneuver coming up soon. Our relay network probably has the longest wait. It's another 1 day, 1 hour still. Our probe bus in high Minmus orbit still has a long time to go. Still 3 days. Moon Station Core also still a while. Two days. So I think our moon transfer vehicle is going to arrive first. Our new survey scanner for the moon. Yep, just 1 day away from capture burn. So I'm going to get this close to our encounter. Close but not quite to our encounter. We still need to separate off our second stage of our launcher. And we want to do that before capture. We want to aim prograde. We did already take all the fuel out of the stage. And then we jettison. Now this should be following back all the way to Kerbin. Which it does indeed look like it is. It's going to get a pretty tight orbit there, if not in impact. So that should burn up in the atmosphere. Excellent. We now have our survey scanner. We will time warp in to our capture burn. Almost there. And I'll be able to start looking at how we want to line up for this contract orbit. Looks like it's going to be a very large inclination change. Hopefully at a decent altitude for our scanner. Let's start setting up our maneuver. Gonna do loose capture. Don't want to have to worry about going too crazy there. Set ourselves up for the maneuver and continue time warping after we've done that. Alright, now we can time warp in. It's going to be a 7-second burn. So maybe 3 or 4 seconds away is where we want to do this burn. Nice, easy capture burn. A little bit of correction. And we'll start looking for that ascending and descending node to find our next opportunity for an inclination correction. Should be right here. It's a lot of inclination change. So we're going to have to be doing a little bit of retrograde maneuvering while we do this. Still not quite spot on. It's pretty close though. Yeah, I think that's probably the maneuver we want to go with. And that's in 3 hours. Probably gonna be what we want to time warp to, though. Let's check the tracking station. See what's gonna come up first. So I got one maneuver coming up in 1 hour, 17 minutes. Then I'll be first. It's a good thing I went and checked. Yeah, so that is going to be first. Let's go to that one. And we'll warp ahead to that maneuver. Get that one out of the way. It's actually our relay network. Very nice. So let's bring that over. To alignment. And then warp much closer to the maneuver. There we go. Done warp just a little. Now, this pretty much gives me the orbit I wanted. We are a little low on this side. Or a little high on the other side, I guess, actually. Oh, okay. Let's do that correction. Tiny bit of retrograde maneuvering. Actually, I could probably do that now. I probably don't have to wait exactly for periaps, do I? Since this is also a little low, perhaps? Maybe that's a bad idea, but, we'll see. Oh yeah, that was a lot of difference for not a lot of maneuvering. Let's turn this way down. We're talking like 1% thrust limiter. Want that 357.9. .94 to be exact. Okay, now we need to do just a little bit of a radial change. That's way too much. Very tiny adjustment. Might be something I need to do manually. Yeah, this is gonna be something I need to do manually because it's just not a lot of change actually being done. Dealing with precision maneuvers. Just did full throttle. Don't know why I did full throttle. Not much closer though. I think that I might just be happy with this. The only thing is, this is like kind of a weird orbital period, huh? Just do a flip around, see if we can't adjust that just a little more towards what we want it to be. Plenty of fuel to be annoyingly exact about this. Then what we want to do when we have this really set up, so we know what our orbital period is, we want to kind of divide that in 3. And that's what we want to make our new orbit. So we want to then basically make it so we have a tighter orbit so we can redeploy each of these satellites in turn. .94. Okay. One final adjustment will be done right at apogee. And I'm going to have to do that one manually too, because that is going to be pretty tight. So, 1 hour, 8 minutes. So let's see what else is coming up for maneuvers. Oh. So, still 24 days away from sunset's next maneuver. It's a long way away. 2 days, 2 hours for Probus B. Relay network is 1 hour, 7 minutes. One station core is 1 day, 2 hours. 1 hour, 34 minutes for our survey satellite. So 1 hour, 7 minutes wins. We're going to go back to piloting this and take that all the way to that prograde correction. Stumbling on words there. All right. Just going prograde until the time comes where we need to do that adjustment. Let's see if we can make this as exact in orbit as possible. And then I'll see what the orbital period is again. Hopefully something that's easy to break down. We'll have to go back and do the moon capture, the moon correction burn for our survey satellite in a minute. Okay, now we want to monitor our periaps. Perfect, 357.94, give or take a couple meters on each side. That is a pretty ideal stationary orbit for Minmus. So that gives us what for an orbital period? 1 day, 5 hours, 13 minutes. That is a weird number. Let's hit the wiki. Let's hit the wiki for a minute. Now that we're on a circular orbit, it doesn't really matter what we do our next maneuvers, so I'm probably just going to leave this be for a second. So we're just going to go to the tracking station. Oh, yeah. Its actual rotation period is 1 day, 5 hours, 13 minutes. So that is exactly what I had of that. So I guess I wasn't too far off there, but it's going to be kind of weird to do a synchronous satellite network for that. Okay, a survey satellite we're now going to take command of. Let's see, each Kerbin day is 6 hours, so that's like, what is that, 11 and a quarter hours? That's weird. Okay. Got this now set up for its maneuver. get it into position. Let's do its burn. So I guess part of that is I don't need to necessarily exactly set them up in a perfect equilateral triangle. It can be pretty close at the altitude I was doing that with in Minmus. So, if it's 11 1/4 hour, I could put one satellite every 4 hours apart on its orbit. 4 hours apart. So that means I could either get it down to 8 hour, so a 1 day 2 hour, or a 4 hour orbit for the actual structure and leave the first satellite in orbit. That might be what I do. Just kind of rough it a little bit. Spitball. Let's time warp up to our maneuver here. So 7-second burn means we're going to want to wait till about 3 or 4 seconds away from our maneuver node to start our burn. Started a little late, actually. A little bit of correction. Overdid it. Overdid it, but it now doesn't give me anything to burn towards, so it's probably pretty close. Yeah, it's fairly close. It's going to be a while before it's in a position for me to actually go and correct the orbit itself. I could probably do like a radial adjust here. Get our periaps more or less on target. It's probably going to be a very fuel inefficient way of doing this. But considering it's only a 1 second burn, I think we're going to be fine. Let's just warp us up to that maneuver. And that's going to bring our next maneuver point much sooner along our path here. So let's warp up to that maneuver node. Very simple 1 second burn. Correction. And go. That's our periaps pretty close. So then at periaps we can then do our retrograde burn. That maneuver now 2 hours, 25 minutes away. One more paranoid check just to see what's going on in the tracking station. Should have some other maneuvers coming up relatively soon. one's in 2 hours. That one's in 1 day. This one's in 2 days. So we're actually good. Our many transfers out to Minmus are well on their way, but it'll be a while till we need to do any adjustment there. So, alright, our moon work continues. Little crashy crash there. Alright. We have a 0.8 second burn. That's very precise. Maybe something a little easier to manage. 15% thrust. A little easier to be precise. Alright, let's warp into that maneuver. See if we can close out this contract. Closing contracts is fun. We are a little ways off from the intended orbit, though. Actually, quite a ways off. Wait 2 seconds away from the maneuver node. Start going full tilt once again. Hey, that actually did get us the contract. That apparently for them is a reasonable deviation. Or at least we're on the right orbit. Yep, we did get the contract. Wow. Who knew? So perform orbital survey. Must be in a stable polar orbit between 25... Okay, so we're pretty near polar orbit, so that actually isn't so bad to correct. So it's between what altitudes? Between 25 kilometers and 1,000. So we're just a little too high up, actually. Let's bring this down quite a bit. Now that we have this contract, 500,000 meters sounds good. Should be interesting. Let's end up getting here with a lot of extra fuel. And when I'm done, I guess I could set this up to replace one of our existing moon satellites, since it does have the relay built into it as well. I don't know. I'll figure that out. I'll figure out what I want to do with this thing. Important thing was getting the contract. And once more, we said this is in almost 4 hours. So one more time, I'm going to check the tracking station and see what else we have coming up for maneuvers, since we also have the Minmus station to try and circularize its orbit. We also have the relay network to work on if I really don't want to time warp, which I could actually probably just do that. We also have a contract craft as well. Yeah, this is coming up sooner. 3 hours 41 minutes is the circularization burn for the... It's actually a Minmus station core. Just reusing the same core we used for Mun. Still have 1 day before the probe bus B needs to be maneuvered. So I could really start working on the relay network first, I guess, actually. Let's do that. Start deploying these satellites. Alright, so I need to plan out bringing this down to a 4 or 8 hour orbital cycle from our current 1 day, 5 hour, 13 minute. So the first step, let's extend some solar panels from our top satellite, since our first satellite is already going to be technically in position. We will finally deploy that one. So let's go ahead. There we go. First satellite in Minmus synchronous orbit. Now, we need to actually aim retrograde. Actually, this shot looks kind of cool. You got Minmus satellite heading for it. You got Kerbin and Mun behind it. It does actually look kind of cool. Pretty happy about that one. That's a thumbnail right there, if I ever did see one. So now, oh, that actually adjusted its orbit quite a bit. We can correct it in a minute. We want to get our orbit down significantly. So now this is... I don't want to click on the other thing. Can you just tell me? Oh, come on. Nope, I don't want to set that as my target. Okay. Right here. 1 day, 3 hours. So we still need to go further. Wait. Yes. Go further. We want 1 day, 2 hours for it to be an 8-hour maneuver. 4 hours doesn't seem like it's going to be a possible thing here. Nope, still more. A little more. There we go. Now we're talking. So now when this comes back around, we'll be ready to deploy another one of the synchronous satellites. Now our first satellite, might want to go ahead and just check on its orbit, because it has been adjusted somewhat. From our little change there, our little deployment. Do some radial correction. And hopefully not smash into anything. It looks like we're clear. So we're going to have to activate the engine. That was kind of scary. Making a whole lot of just dead clicks. Alright. Let's thrust limit this down actually quite a bit. I can do this very precise maneuvering. .9 is what we want. Ooh, we actually lowered our orbit a little bit. Now I need to just overshoot that a little bit. 357.5. 10.9. So we need to make this 358.3. Nope, too far. There we go. Now at our halfway mark. Do the radial burn to correct. Which I don't know why I just bothered to do that, because I know it's going to be too small an adjustment to actually do with a maneuver. We'll have to just manually do it. Alright. Not bad. Do some time warp. Be watching our Mun station. Should have set as our target so it's a little easier to monitor. Because its maneuver is coming up. I want to make sure we don't miss that. A lot all going on at once. And after this makes it to its maneuver, I'll have to jump over to the moon to monitor what's going on over there as well, because I do have to adjust that satellite, get it into a polar orbit, so we can start doing our survey scan of the moon, since we already have a satellite out there and capable. Don't really intend to mine the moon that much, I don't think. I'm really going to try and make Minmus our center of attention for mining. This is coming up on its node, though. This is good. Looks like this might make it before the moon station makes it to its maneuver. It will indeed. So that's definitely a good thing. So let's see. Can we tweak this orbit? Oop, nope. Want to go in stability assist mode. Thank you. Thank you, little probe. Probe was trying to keep me pointing prograde. So opposite way. This way. .9. Almost there. It's pretty close to circular at this point. And pretty close to our exact orbit that we wanted. So that's really not too bad. I'm just going to go with it. Get our moon station core, or our Minmus station core. I gotta rename that so I stop calling it a moon station core. It is the same core. It is the same one we use for the moon. But obviously this is for Minmus, which is why we have it in orbit of Minmus. So that's just how we do things. Rename vessel. Minmus. All right. We'll have a 1 second burn. Let's work this up to the maneuver. Now, hopefully with this relay network finally in place, we won't really have any more issues with Minmus communication. Which means we'll be able to conduct more normal missions here. Getting ready for this maneuver. Actually, probably just aim retrograde and just leave it at that. Pretty spot on. Nice circular maneuver. I think that's where we want to keep our station. So there's one thing down. What I can do is we did use up all our fuel burning inside this thing's fairing the other night. We do have room to actually dump all this fuel. And we can stage off the booster and leave just the station core itself. The only thing is we don't need very much to completely deorbit. So we might actually throw this thing back into orbit if I'm not careful. Might have to adjust the solid rocket retro motors. So let's see. 8 solid fuel. to include these in delta V calculations. Oh, damn. Boy. It's 293 meters a second. We're only doing 92. So that would completely put it back into a retrograde orbit. So what we want to do... How can I disable just some of these? I would like to disable half of them. So let's see. Take engine 1. No, I don't want to take all of them. Is there a way to... Yes, there is. Okay. Good. I want to take engine 1, engine 3, engine 5. I want to activate just those. So 1. Let's make sure these are circular. So that's 1. Yep, each one is skipping 1. Okay. Throw the separatron right there, or the stack separator right there. Alright, now that should be what we need to just deorbit this darn thing. And let's see if my math was any good. We're going to have to aim prograde. So that this booster will naturally fire off retrograde. It's now the top section of what will probably be our last old school K-15. So kiss it goodbye. Perfect. Now, if I did that right... Yeah, I did! Perfect! That'll smash into Minmus and we won't have any space debris left over. Now let's go to the tracking station. Wow, that was marvelous. I like when things go according to plan. Alright, we're almost to our maneuver here. Get our polar orbit set up. And then we can start resource scanning. Again, not really like a high priority for me to resource scan around the moon, since I intend to do most mining operations at Minmus, if not all. But since we already had to put a satellite here for a contract, I figured I might as well. This might not be the correct inclination for this. Let's see what it says. Let's aim at the moon, wherever it is. There we go. Just want regular stability assist. Thank you. There we are. Stable polar orbit. So yeah, that's not going to be enough. Wait a minute. 100,000. Yeah. Yeah, we're at the right altitude. So yeah, it's definitely that we're at the wrong inclination. polar. There we go. That's a perfectly circular polar orbit. Maybe not perfectly polar. Hard to do that. 2 for maneuver. Alright. So now that maneuver is in 1 hour, 5 minutes. So I think we are safe to go ahead and time warp to that one. Our next relay satellite release should be a little longer from now than that. This is going to be a 42-second burn? That's not right. We're way thrust limited then. Yep, we are. 7-second burn. That makes more sense. Let's get ourselves about 4 seconds away from this maneuver. Alright, now let's see if we can do that orbital survey. Hey, look at that! Burning through the electric charge. Nice, that's actually science as well. Ooh, pretty. Heat map. Heat map blue. So, doesn't really tell you. Blue then would be where there's minerals. I assume if it says heat map blue, then it, yeah, blue would be where there's minerals. Unless it is the inverse. It could be that that is where there's stuff. Well, then you got a really blue section up there. Oh, so that's really... the poles up there is where it's really good. That's kind of cool that now I can do that. So now I can of course fine-tune that if I put a rover down. Very cool. Very cool indeed. happy satellite. Getting our readings for us. So, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy about this whole thing. And it leaves it up. Oh, that's cool. So, yeah, this has got to be... Yeah, we're getting ourselves ready for mining operations. This is going to be awesome. We got another one of those scanners on the way to Minmus. Really cool. Now, see if we can get this relay network finished. And we'll make a very good step towards completing our Minmus infrastructure. Oh yeah, I was supposed to maneuver this thing. No, I wasn't. What am I talking about? This thing. Which is still coming up on its maneuver. Right? Just real quick. Let's see if I missed a maneuver there. Might have. Nope. Looking good. So there's another hour to go. So we'll finish this and then we'll get that going. So now what we'll need to do... Oof, my back. Once we get to the apogee of our flight on this craft, we're going to deploy this top satellite. Basically going to treat it like a launch. We're going to deploy it, and we're going to then work on getting it into a circular orbit. And leaving the bottom section to head back down the Minmus on its expedited run around the moon, and then the moon of Minmus, I guess. Whatever. Minmus. It's expedited run around Minmus, comes back to the apogee, and then we get the last piece onto a circular orbit, and then these will be fairly equilateral, distant apart. So, equilateral triangle. Is there a way to change the ejection force on this? Nope, there is not. One. Decouple. Okay. Need to activate the engine. Okay, we need to now start going prograde immediately. Okay, not that immediately. Holy crap. Alright, forgot to thrust limit it. That's cool. Actually, that looks pretty good. It looks actually really good. 357 point. Needs to just go a little less. Almost there already. Thrust limit way down. Okay. Can now do a little bit of A bit of radial burn to level these out. Oh, that's the wrong way. Other way. Okay, back to prograde. Just get this as exact as possible. 7.9, 357. So now we need to go a little bit more this way. This is becoming kind of funny. This is very hard to get an exact orbit like that, though. Actually, retrograde slightly. Ah, this is silly. Nope, don't want to auto aim, thank you. Okay. Should just need the absolute tiniest amount of prograde. I'm going to be this picky. 1% thrust limiter. Okay, that should be fairly dead on. Now, you switch to this while we wait for it to come around one more time, deploy the final satellite. We will have a Minmus synchronous network. Get this a little closer. Realign. And then time warp the rest of the way in. Satellite's going to basically have to stop on a dime and then get it back up to orbital velocity again. So it's going to be kind of a weird burn. We're basically stopping in space. Which is why we're somewhere between retrograde and our inclination. Excellent. Okay. Now that we've done that, start doing our retrograde maneuver. And then we'll do the other side of the burn here in 3 days. And that'll, of course, be to circularize. And we'll have another contract complete with one probe. Now our relay, again. Minmus synchronous relay network. It has to be fun, right? So let's see. Included in Delta V calculations, yes. No. Yes. It's not really telling me. So at this altitude, though, yeah, let's do this. Retros 1 and 3. Let's only activate those. That's 49 meters a second of Delta V. It should be enough to deorbit this. So that's how we're going to do that. It still has like 8 hours before our next maneuver. Six hours. And all these are coming up. Do I really want to time warp an entire day? I guess I kind of do. We've done most everything else. We've got 3 days before this needs to be circularized. It's not very often I time warp an entire day. I usually don't like to do that, but this time it's pretty necessary. But this is perfect. Now, as we're approaching our apogee, we've got our other 2 relays in position. So yeah, it should be a fairly equilateral triangle. Between these 3 relays by the time this gets into its position. A little less than equilateral, actually. A little messed up, but to be fair, I didn't do my timing exact, so I did decide to ballpark it. But we should hit pretty much every point of orbit and surface on Minmus anyway. It'll be close enough to be functional. And that's what I was looking for. So when we come up here on our maneuver, I want to make sure we're aiming prograde. And I am going to stage off this booster finally. That got us all the way here, set up our orbit, did all this work for us. We are now going to jettison it into Minmus. Because of how slow it's traveling, I actually had to disable 2 of the retro boosters here to make sure that it didn't go back into a retrograde orbit, because that would not be very fun to try and clean up later. it goes. Now, we need to get this guy on a circular orbit. So to do that, we need to thrust limit it significantly, so I can actually control this darn thing. As I learned from the other two satellites. Oh, helps if the engine is activated. There we are. A little bit of radial correction. Look at that. Smooth as silk. Even if I activate our debris. I'd like to see what path that's taking. Yep, heading... Wow, it actually stopped dead. It's almost heading straight for Minmus. So I did my math pretty good there. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, any more than those two boosters, that would have put it right back into a retrograde orbit. That would have stunk to try and fix later. I need to watch. Can't really do this with a maneuver node because it's going to be too easy to overshoot. So, yeah, want to make sure I'm doing this the right way around, which I was not. And we're now going to do some correction here. Just make sure we're right around the correct orbit here. 57.9. I'm just going to bring that around a little bit. Actually bring that back so we can go ahead and do a retrograde burn. Wow, that is hard to do. So thrust limit even more. Thrust limit is down to 1.5%. Want one side of this orbit to be the correct height where we are, which we pretty much are anyway, so it shouldn't be that hard to do. And one side to be opposite of us. Although actually that kind of, all that messing around kind of did the trick anyway. 37.9, 37.9. Close enough. So we should have pretty good relay going on here. I probably need to actually catch this one up a little bit to make this properly equilateral. Really should be like right about here-ish. So probably could do that if I wanted to. I might do that later. Only knows all these satellites have plenty of fuel in them to keep maneuvering them. Check on the other ones. See how they're all showing exactly the same orbital velocity, 65.0 meters a second. Yeah, it should be a fairly stable communication network. That on top of our existing network around Kerbin and our moon relay network, which is much more lazy than this. Looking pretty solid. Well, I think that's going to be it for the night as well. That was a lot of errands to do there. Lots of Minmus focus. We still have lots of things on the way. We have our nuclear transfer vehicle, our planetary transfer vehicle on its way to Minmus. And that'll bring some fuel off to the station. We also have a lander on its way, a rover, to go set down on Minmus and do some further investigations on different resources we could be gathering. We also have a survey satellite on its way to do that from orbit. So between the two, they'll be narrowing down really our exact landing zone we want for mining efficiently on Minmus. All right, That's all I have for today. Anyone that wants to see more, you could always check out the rest of our content down there at the bottom at youtube.com/dude-I-called-you-bro. I stream pretty much every night at 7 p.m. if you want to catch the next stream instead. And with that, have a great night.